Welcome back to Ben's Book Club. Today, we are diving into an absolute classic, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's one of those books that's just always been around. You've either read it or you for sure know somebody who says it totally changed their life. And there's a reason for that. Just look at this number. Over 30 million copies sold since 1936. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire population of Australia. For a book that came out during the Great Depression, that's not just a long shelf life. It's practically immortal. Which, of course, brings us to the big question, right? Can a set of rules written when our grandparents were kids really still apply in our world of Slack notifications, DMs, and endless Zoom calls? Well, let's get into it and find out. Okay, so to really get this book, you have to start with Carnegie's main idea, what he called the 85% rule. And you got to remember, back in 1936, this was a pretty wild thing to say. Carnegie basically claimed that a staggering 85% of your financial success comes down to human engineering. Your personality and your ability to deal with people. Only 15% comes from your actual technical knowledge. Just let that sink in for a second. He's saying your people skills are literally 5 times more valuable than your resume. So if that 85% is the magic number, how in the world do you master it? Well, Carnegie breaks it all down for us, starting with the absolute basics of just connecting with other humans. And his very first rule, funny enough, is a powerful don't. He hits us with this all-timer. Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain. And most fools do. His point is so simple but so true. Criticizing people doesn't work. It just makes them defensive and, kind of makes them resent you. So it really boils down to this 3-step process. First, like we just said, stop complaining and criticizing. Then you got to replace all that negative energy with honest and sincere appreciation. Not cheap flattery, but real recognition. And then the real game changer, step 3, you have to learn to see things from their perspective. Figure out what they want and talk about how your ideas help them get it. From that foundation, he gives us these 6 really practical ways to make people actually like you. And yeah, they look pretty simple, right? Smile, be a good listener, but the magic is in the execution. It's about being genuinely interested in other people. It's about remembering that hearing their own name is the sweetest sound in the world to them, and that word at the very end is the key to all of it, sincerely. If you're not sincere, none of this works. It's just a bag of tricks. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's all about shifting your focus outward instead of inward. It's the complete opposite of how our social media feeds train us to think. Real connection, real influence, it comes from being generous with your attention. So, once you've built that rapport, you can move up to the next level, winning people over to your way of thinking. And Carnegie's #1 rule for this, it's going to seem totally backwards at first. I love this one. It's one of the most powerful and counterintuitive ideas in the whole book. Carnegie says you can't win an argument because even if you prove you're right with facts and logic, you've made the other person feel bad. You wounded their pride. So you won the point, but you lost the person. And here's the crucial shift in thinking. It's about changing your goal from winning the argument to winning the person. One path leads to resentment. The other leads to partnership. At the end of the day, the goal isn't just to be right. It's to be effective. And here's a tactic that honestly feels like a superpower in today's world. When you realize you're wrong, just admit it. And not just admit it, but do it quickly and with enthusiasm. It completely disarms the other person. They were gearing up for a fight, and you just let all the air out of their argument. It's an incredible trust builder. But this brings us to the biggest knock on Carnegie's whole philosophy, right? Is this stuff genuine respect? Or is it just a clever way to manipulate people? Is this a guide to real connection? Or is it a playbook for getting what you want? Carnegie defense always comes back to that one single word, sincerity. And nowhere is that thin line between influence and manipulation tested more than when you're in a position of leadership. The last part of the book is basically a guide on how to lead in a way that gets results without making people hate you. Just look at the difference here. The old school boss attacks directly. You messed up. And what happens? The person gets defensive. The Carnegie leader, on the other hand, protects that person's ego while still pointing out the problem. And let's be honest, which one is more likely to actually get a better result? What's wild is that his key tactics for leaders read like they're pulled from a modern management seminar because he basically wrote the playbook. Little things like starting with praise before giving criticism, or asking questions instead of just shouting orders. And the big one, always, always let the other person save face. This stuff is standard practice now, but he was writing about it almost a century ago. So, this brings us all the way back to our first question. After looking at all this, where do we land? Is this book still an essential playbook for life, or is it just an outdated manual? So, what's the verdict? Well, on the one hand, the core wisdom, empathy, sincere appreciation, really listening to people, that stuff is absolutely timeless. That will always, always work. But the critics have a fair point too. In our cynical world, if your heart isn't in it, these techniques can come across as pretty fake. Sincerity really is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Which maybe leads us to the real takeaway here. In our modern world, a world of algorithms designed to steal our attention, and avatars that hide who we are, maybe the simple act of giving someone your genuine, undivided interest isn't just a nice skill to have. Maybe it's the ultimate superpower.
Subscribe so you don't miss an episode.